Hey, Composing Gloves here. I'm wearing a hat. Today we're going to be talking about the meters and isotopes trash 2. Pretty straightforward. So over here, you have some meters. I'm also going to be covering something I forgot to cover in the dynamics processor, which is the options you have here to view your gain reduction in the meters over here. First, let's go over here to the bulk of this video. So you see here we have these 2 meters. These are they're very straightforward. You have input. So this is the input coming into trash. This is the output coming out of trash. You have 2 faders for each one, but when you move them, they move together. You might be wondering, what is this for? Well, if you unlock it down here at the bottom, you can move one separate from the other. This is valuable if you want to adjust the left and right on your signal. So input gain left, input gain right, and then outputs are vice versa, the same. You have a limiter here. Now this limiter acts on the 0 dB value. And if we right click on it and open up your limiter options, you have a couple different behaviors: quiet, loud, and clipped. I have thrown a lot of stuff at this, and I don't notice mega big differences when I use these. So I just leave it on quiet. You also have a 0 latency option. This makes it so that it can work immediately. It doesn't have any latency applied to it. I leave it off because when it's off, it can look ahead. So it's like a look ahead limiter as well. You can experiment with it, but I'm pretty much fine with the way this is doing what it's doing. Occasionally, it may make a big difference, but most of the time, I haven't run into a situation where it really has yet. So that's what I leave it on. But you have it where it more aggressively does its job. So a limiter, when it hits 0, it prevents it from going over 0 dB, right? And we have loud and clipped, and those are just more aggressive forms. They have different release times, and there are things of that nature. So you could try them out. Try them out for yourself. Now, these meters themselves, when we play it, my voice just cracked. When we play it, we see that we have a couple of things that are being indicated. First off, we have this RMS level that's being indicated. Next, we have our true peak, or not our true peak. We have our just our peak hold. And this is just showing us the last peak that was hit. You see that we can see our RMS value consistently shifting right here. And then we can see our last peak. So it's telling us, our last peak was at negative 4.6 dB. So that's kind of an important thing for us to know. If we right click on it and go to IO options, we can manipulate these things. So we have enable meter, which is turns it on. I mean, right now I see it's off. So if you need to save some CPU, you can turn that on. Show peak hold is that line right there. If we turn this off, it goes away. If we turn it back on, it comes back. I like it on because I like to see where my peaks are hitting, right? Now, you should know, but RMS stands for root mean square, and it uses a period of time. I'm not 100% sure on how root mean square works, but I know that it's a much more accurate reading for volume, for loudness, because it's an average over time. Versus peaks is just at one moment in time. Our ears aren't fast enough to respond to like very transient sounds, so when they get louder, they change in character rather than volume. So here, it's very helpful to have an RMS meter because that's more true to like what we would perceive as volume. We have a peak hold time, so this is how long those peaks stay where they are. Integration time is, I believe, the window that it uses for the RMS calculation. So how big that window is, how much stuff it takes into account to generate that readout. And then we have a readout as max peak, and this is the readout up here. So this is the last peak. If we change it to current, you see it's showing us the current value. So we play it and it's showing us the current peaks. If we change it to max peak, it's sticking to whatever the last biggest peak was. We also have an input output gain when bypass. So if you hit bypass down here, this is going to adjust the volume on before your signal comes in. And why would you want to do this? Well, if you're comparing like A being like before trash and after trash, which I don't do unless I'm mixing and I'm using this as some sort of an effect on like a vocal or something, in which case I do this a lot. But as far as creatively, I use this very little. But as a mixing engineer, so anyways, I don't know. That's just the way I use it. But if you're using it, sometimes there'll be a volume boost or cut relative to your input, and that can affect your judgment of the sound. You just want to know what the sonic character, how that's changed. You're going to mix the volume. Ideally, you're going to have the volume at a volume you like, but if you have some sort of offset on the before and after, it's wise to try and level match those with this. That way, when you hit bypass, this thing comes into play, allowing you to make better judgments on the character of the sound you've created. Now, that's pretty much the meters here. Very useful meters. So we can see our RMS here, and so if you want your sound to sound louder, you're going to try and get your RMS louder. You don't want to push your peaks louder. You want to push your RMS. All right, now let's come over here to the dynamics module. Now on this dynamics module, we have these meters over here, right? And if we go to dynamics options, the only one I'm really going to touch on, I'm going to go over just a couple others that are in here, just this because it's probably going to be the final video. Maybe there might be a couple more after this showing it with more combinations of effects and things, but you more or less get it now. The threshold meter, we have a gain reduction, which of course shows us in red the amount of reduction it's applying to our signal. So we're familiar with that. Very straightforward and very intuitive. But we also have this histogram. This will show us how often it ranges at a particular spot on the meters. So like if we were to play this, we say, oh, look at that. That's the average. Like this is definitely the loudest part of the sound. And I can make judgments based on where that is and place my threshold around that area if that's the way I want to go about it. The histogram I'm not as used to working with as just straight meters. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and I'm excited to have that sort of an option. So one reason why it didn't come to mind when I was showing you guys this, I knew it was there, I just had forgot about it. Okay, so to finish this up, there are a couple other things you should know. Now these things are there on every module, and if you hit bypass, it's the same thing as hitting it right here. We can solo a module as well, and you have to actually be on the module page to get to it. We have a history option here, and the history is kind of interesting. You can set various things, like you can set A to be there and set B to be there and set like C to be there. And then when you switch between these, you can like quickly go back and forth through your history. Maybe you've made a series of moves that you want to audition and see what they sound like. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I'm not probably going to use it, but I definitely think it's forward thinking. And maybe one day I'll be grabbing it all the time. Who knows? You can also hit clear and clear your history. The reason why this history is separate is because if you hit Control Z inside Trash 2, you're gonna, why it's a plugin, you're gonna end up Control Zing on your DAW. So they give you this option to give you much more extensive control over the moves you've made in Trash 2. Okay, so there's that. We've already talked about the graph and what goes on there. We have this bypass button down here and the wet dry, which I have not pointed out yet, but I've touched them several times, so hopefully you've noticed them. We have our presets menu, and you can turn it off by getting rid of the show at startup, and you can add new presets. If you make adjustments and you want to update an existing preset, you literally just click update, but you want to be careful because you'll overwrite that original preset. So you probably want to add them, and the presets are not very big. It's just basically a record of the settings you have. So don't be worried about like taking up any sort of memory because they're just really tiny files. All right, up next, we have our options. In here, there's just a load of things. We have looked at most of these things in here. And some of these things simply you're probably not going to touch very often. So like, for example, one that you might touch when maybe you're getting ready to render out your song or whatever, you could try oversampling, and it will oversample your signal and reduce aliasing. But if you've gotten Trash to sound the way you want, which you probably have because you've been working with it off, then you probably want to leave this off because this could change the way Trash sounds quite dramatically sometimes. Other times it might not sound that different at all. So it just depends on what you're doing and probably on how much you're using the wave shapers and the feedback loops and stuff. So that's that. Now let's come over, and this is the last page. So you have your enable meters here. You have tooltips. So that's when you hover over things. It's been helping me along occasionally when I like look at something and forgot like what exactly it does. I just hover over it and it will show me what it does. And I like them on, but if you don't like them on, you can turn them off. We have animation. So check it out. If I close this and hit OK, it's like super fancy and does that. And I get a kick out of that. So I like that, but you can turn it off. Probably save CPU. But the whole CPU thing, if your plugin's open, then you're going to be using that plugin, and you should really close it when you're done. Occasionally, like you see, I have a Harmer sitting back here, and that's bad. That actually takes CPU to have it displayed. And something like Isotope that's got so many real-time displays going on, that can eat a lot of CPU. So you want to just close your plugins, and then that way you can have it open and have all the settings you want, and then just close it when you're done. And that's a really great thing. If you have a lot of windows open, and sometimes this happens to me, I just leave things open occasionally. You can hit F12 and it will close all your windows for you. So that's a really great way. And that's why sometimes when you load up a project and all those windows pop up of all the plugs you have open, I don't know if there's a way in FL to do this, but it eats a lot of CPU having all those things open. That's why some people, if their computer's not that great, it will just not work for you because their computer's trying to handle all this. And now you've got an issue. So some people are like slamming F12 when it loads up. That way they can use their project. Because they don't want all their resources to go to that sort of thing. So anyways, that's my spiel on CPU. You can alter like buffer size and stuff as well. Tool tips, you have animated focus, which is, so this shows you, there are these brackets that appear occasionally. I am not super fluent in what this means, but it's referencing the brackets. So if you're going to automate something, it'll show you like visually what you have selected. And then we have this dim controls when bypassed. I totally recommend having this on. You can control like the frame rate, opacity, things like that as well. And also on this is another one you might want to be touching. So the dim control and bypass real quick. I like that because if something's off, it's really helpful to see it's dimmed because that just says it's off to me. So you might be the same way. Probably are, unless you're like kind of weird and like things not to be dimmed and you prefer to look at power buttons to know. I don't prefer that. And then we also have the bypass indicators, solid and blinking. So if we bypass something, it will like versus blink versus solid. So if we like have something like this, what did I set it on? Options, blinking. We hit okay, and then now you see it's blinking. That to me drives me nuts. So I want solid. I've been ironically doing most of these tutorials with solid. I've made some changes on my laptop that I forget I've made them on my laptop. So I'll come to my desktop and I'll be working and I'll be like, why is that thing blinking? I thought I changed that. And then I'm like, oh, I did change that. I just didn't change it on this one. So there's a couple of things like that. And so that's that. Animated focus turns on and off the animated white brackets, which indicate the control where the keyboard commands are sent. So that's like whatever. If someone wants to be fancy and tell us what that means in the descriptions, that's great. I'm not going to look it up because I don't worry about it too much. Something else that I'm going to cover real quick is automating something because maybe you're just unfamiliar with it, especially in third-party plugs. So in order to automate something in FL at least, let's say that like you want to move this resonance right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the resonance. And what we can do is if we go over here up to this little icon by the cog wheel, and go to browse parameters. This is going to bring up everything we can automate inside this plugin. And so we just move it and it will actually highlight it. And from there you can right click and hit create automation clip. And now we have an automation clip for this event. So if I move it through this automation clip, it's going to move as well. So you see it moving according to the automation that we have set. And it's also got that internal modulation that is already included in Trash 2. Another handy dandy feature about this browse parameters is if you just move any parameter at this point, you see you have like Note 5 enabled. So you can enable and disable things. It will automatically move to show you which one you have. This is far nicer than a number of other DAWs that I've used where I want to automate something and I find out it's really quite a chore to do. Another option you have is, let's say you don't want to go to the browse parameters function. You think that's not cool. So you can go over here, you can move something and you can go to tools, last tweaked, and then you can go to create automation clip. I've heard a number of people actually argue that this is a faster method. I think this method is way slower than this method, but you know, whatever. Cool, good for you. You want to, if you're used to coming up here and doing it like really fast, it could become a habit, which would give you an advantage to going that way, I guess. But I think this is much closer. And then if you accidentally have moved the wrong thing, you can just move the right thing. It will automatically take you there. So I think it's better. But I've even gone so far as on my website, you can download an auto hotkey file and you just run it. I don't have it running right now, but if I hit Windows key E, I'll move a parameter or just make sure my focus is on, my keyboard's been focused on the plug, and I'll hit Windows key E and it will automatically bring me up to this menu instantly. So now that this method is super fast, but I also made one that also does the last tweak. So now this method is also even faster because it will even create the automation clip for me. But it depends on which one I'm going to go for. I've been using this one recently. I've tried both. I really have. And I don't know how I make my decisions anymore. I do whatever it comes to mind. But if you have any questions about this, go ahead and let me know. I hope you have found these useful and informative. You will see these more probably throughout other tutorials that I do because I grab it quite a bit now. This really is a distortion plugin that I think is totally excellent. I think for the package and what you get. It's great. You close it, and then you can send it through a couple other plugs, maybe open up another one. Very satisfying. And it's interesting to note the differences between that and something like Fruity Wave Shaper, because at first I thought they were going to be much more similar, but they're not. I have a buzzing sound going on, which is very annoying. But anyways, that's that. If you have any questions, again, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.